well, what's the root of not giving myself time and money? And I had to really realize it's, and through journal writing and really introspection, I really looked at, oh, I had this dad that worked all the time, that compulsively overworked. And so I intuitively and instinctually took that on as a way of being. And if I'm not questioning a way of being, there is no way for me to get out of that way of being. I am trapped in the prison of that way of being because I am not looking at it. And so I began to look at it, and that was hard. It's like, I love my dad. When we're having to look at, our parent may be making a mistake, that's hard to look at if we love that parent, right? And care about that parent. But people are imperfect. Being a human being is an imperfect opportunity, right?
Hello, and welcome to Living Her Legacy, a podcast that celebrates and serves mamas who are living their best life after starting their families. I am your host, Jill Sutton, and thank you for joining today. Today on the podcast, we have Kristin Morrison. She is a life and business coach, and we draw a lot of parallels between new business owners as well as experienced business owners and the troubles that they can go through and how that ties into being a mom or a new mom and different seasons that change in your life, as well as new identities and roles that you take on with each new challenge and phase. We start to identify a few things that come from our past that have created limiting beliefs in us and are really blocking us from success in the future. And that was a really fun conversation to have with Kristin, being able to see and self-reflect some of those things. And I think you guys will really enjoy the conversation. If you like what you see here, I would love it if you would follow the podcast on wherever you listen to your podcasts, as well as subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're more present on YouTube. If you feel so led to make a financial contribution to the podcast, there are a couple different ways you can do that. There is on my podcast page, there's a link down in the description below where you can go and set up a recurring monetary donation. There are 3 different options to choose from, 3 different tiers to choose from. That just goes to operating costs of the podcast, but I'm also incorporating something else where we are giving back 10% of all donations received to the podcast back out to charities and foundations. If you don't want to set up a recurring payment, I have set up a PayPal button on my website where you can just donate one time and any amount. And you can find that at jillgsutton.com/podcast. Just scroll to the bottom and you should see that PayPal button there. This quarter, I am partnering with Palmetto Women's Center. They are a local organization that offers free pregnancy testing and ultrasounds to women who have unexpected pregnancies. They are also providing a lot of information and education on the choices available and offering resources and help if they're wanting to keep the baby. They also offer education courses to husbands, spouses, and partners as well in that journey so that everybody is on the same page and can help support mama. I really love what they're doing. They are a Christian-based organization, and all of the services that they offer to the community are free of charge. So if you guys feel like donating at all to the podcast, just know that 10% of your donation is going back out to that foundation this quarter. I will be changing it up every quarter. Some of them will be coming back around. So if there is somebody that you know that you want to donate to or support, go ahead and send me that information because I would love to add them to the list of charities and foundations that we are going to support as a podcast. Welcome, Kristin. Thank you for joining.
I'm really happy to be here, Jill.
I'm excited for our conversation today.
Me too.
I would love for you to just introduce yourself to the audience and let them know who you are and maybe what you're about or where you're from, any kind of those questions that get people to know you a little bit better.
Absolutely. So I am a holistic business and life coach. So I use both my intuition and gut instinct and logical kind of practical brain. I use both of those when I'm working with my coaching clients. And I've been coaching since the year 2000. So I've coached thousands of business owners from all over the world. And what I'm doing currently is, in addition to coaching and leading workshops and webinars, is I have a podcast called Business Pathfinder, which is coaching sessions on the podcast. So I have people who apply from all over the world, business owners, typically, sometimes not. And if I feel like their challenge or issue will be a good fit for the podcast, they'll still get on. And I feel like that's a lot of value for listeners, because business owners not only have a business, but they need a life. And so being able to have both of those is really important. So yeah, so that has been out for 3 months, that podcast, and it's gaining a lot of traction and just hit 2.5%. The top 2.5% in podcasts.
Oh, that's great.
So yeah, it's really, really feels really gratifying, because it took about a year to create that podcast and record the initial 25 coaching clients. And what I think is very different from even the coaching podcasts that might be out there is that I purposefully don't know very much about the coaching client or their challenge. My podcast team goes through that, and they actually pick the clients that they think could be a good fit for the podcast, and in terms of their challenge, and then they tell me, and then I say yes or no. So at that point, I only usually know their name, kind of a general idea of their challenge and what they do for a living. And so it really is, some of the clients I know I've worked with before, so I'm clear on who they are, but most of them I've never met. And so I feel like there's something really leveling about me not knowing too much about them and what they're going through and their biggest challenge that they really want to work through in the podcast. And they are feeling very vulnerable about being on the podcast and sharing their challenge. They don't know what's going to come out, what they're going to say. And most of the sessions are really unfiltered. We don't do very much editing, because we purposefully like listeners to be able to be in the session that is sometimes imperfect. There are pauses that allow for the soul to emerge. It's like, a lot of times people are really digging deep in these sessions, and I'm digging deep too, trying to help the path be clear in terms of where I think they should go next. It doesn't necessarily mean that they will do that, but I'm offering that as a suggestion. And so within 45 minutes, we go from them kind of throwing down this challenge, which is like this, almost like a net that is knotty and hard to unravel. And then together we're unraveling it in the session. And so listeners really hear that unraveling. And I've heard from a lot of listeners that unraveling can be incredibly helpful, because a lot of business owners feel like they need to have the answers. They see these Instagram influencers who are hotshot business people or boss babes. I say that in quotes, but it's like there's so much of the mentality of I've got it all together in business. But really, most people who start a business have no idea what they're doing, even if they've gone to business school. It's one thing to learn it in our mind. It's another thing to actually implement it in our business while we're running our lives. So that's a little bit about what I do and how I do it.
That's awesome. Congratulations on your podcast. That's really
Thank
exciting.
you.
And I can see how that could be really helpful for people to kind of watch someone else go through a transformation and be able to kind of liken it to themselves. And I do also agree with you on hearing, you see a lot of the boss babes and that have kind of made it, right? They're kind of up there. And It actually reminds me, I read a book. I was actually looking up her name, Lindsay Teague Moreno, and her book is called Boss Up. And she talks a lot in the book about being more transparent about your struggles and how that actually creates a stronger pull towards you, a stronger community where they feel like they know you more and that you're willing to kind of share some of the struggles of being a business owner or being successful or things like that. And I think that's where people really can feel more relatable, other than, like you said, you see kind of these boss babes up there and it's unattainable. It feels unattainable.
That's right. They're on a pedestal, and it's hard for us, as mortal humans to get up there. And in some ways, I wonder, how actually, how well they're doing. Like, because a lot of people portray as if they're doing great on social media, and then you'll hear that they've committed suicide or something. It's like, I'm sorry to bring up such a challenging topic, but that's kind of the dichotomy that we're dealing with when it comes to social media. And so to put it out there that life is hard, or even to talk about the prior struggles, I think can be really valuable for business owners and just people in general, because we're all doing the best we can with what we have. And we're learning from each other. I learn a lot from my coaching clients who come in and throw this, this knotty net, that's just like hard to unravel. I learn a lot from them, and then sharing what they're dealing with. It's powerful.
Yeah.
And I never know where, I have an idea at the beginning, and they do too, where we think we're going to end up, but it is rarely that. Like, I am often surprised. And part of that is letting go. There's something really powerful about realizing, maybe I don't have all the answers, but maybe the inner wisdom does, that I can draw upon. And the intuitive hits that I get, I'm not saying just me, but us as a collective, we have that innate wisdom inside of ourselves. And if we take a moment to just check in, how does my body feel in relation to this challenge? How does my body feel in relation to where I'm saying I want to go? Do I feel tense when I think about that? Well, that might be a clue that maybe that's not exactly where you want to go. It's about listening to the heart. It's about listening to the body as a whole. And that's why, I call myself a holistic business coach, because it's not just about the linear process. It's really about deep listening to all parts of ourselves that can really lead us in the right direction if we're willing to listen. And sometimes it takes an outer source, right, to be able to offer that perspective. Because, us trying to do it on our own isn't always going to give us the answers that we need. Sometimes we need to bounce it off someone else.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely feel like, the population that I serve with this podcast is that mama population. And a lot of them go through such transitions with, like you said, kind of that letting go, like, there's a huge life change that happens. And then you're one person, one day, and then you're a mom the next day, and you wrestle with kind of your new identity, and maybe not identity is maybe not the right word for that, but your new role and how that is going to take part of your life.
Yeah, I actually love that you said new identity, because I do think whenever we make a big change in our life or have a transformation, and going from being without kids to having a child, that is a huge transformation. Huge. As well as being single and going to being married, as well as, doing something in our work and then changing it entirely and creating something new, like all of those can create a new identity that leads to who am I now? I don't know who I am. And that can feel very challenging and scary. A lot of moms that I work with, it's kind of like business owners. They are looking at these influencer moms thinking, I should be like that. But really, it's like, no, you should be like you. That child has you as a mom. And if you're trying to be something you're not, kids can smell that from a mile away, right? They feel inauthenticity at a very deep level. They are tuned in. And so I think bringing it back to that vulnerability within the new identity and really giving ourselves a lot of mercy and grace within that new identity, whatever it may be, whether we're a new mom, a new business owner, whether we have a new job and we're like, imposter syndrome, right? Like, what am I doing here? I have no idea what I'm doing. I hear that from a lot of my coaching clients. And it's like having that mercy, having that grace, having that, gentleness and that kind inner parent that can come and really nurture us in the face of us nurturing a child, nurturing a business, taking a leap of faith in our life, whatever we're doing. Yeah. And so that it really is, the new identity is a transformation. We've gone from one part of being something and then creating something totally new or stepping into something totally new. Yeah. And when we're there, we don't know where we're going. It has never happened before in our lives. We may see people that are doing that have been moms before, and we feel like they're doing it the way we would like to do it. But, here it's like doing something new and almost being blind in a way, right? Having that tapping stick and like, does this feel right? Does this feel right? We're just in some ways making it up as we go, and trying to do the best we can.
Yeah. And I definitely feel like that's not something that is really talked about amongst, new parents. And there is a lot of guilt feeling where you're like, I'm not measuring up to what I see on social media. I'm not, how is she able to do that? How does she keep her house clean? How does she run that business? And, she's got a 3-month-old at home, and we have all these, comparisons when we kind of see that. And like you said, the best parent for that child or mother for that child is you. Like you need to be yourself. You need to not be somebody else and trying to fill, a void that you might feel.
Yeah. And, because kids are so tuned in, so tapped in to the feeling world, they feel love at a deep level. Like, and we did too at a time, when we were very, very young, and we can go back to that, as parents, right? We get to experience that. But the thing is that if a new mom is really giving that child love with her fullest heart, she's like a rock star. And if that child is 3 years old or 5 years old and her house is a mess, but she is giving that child like the fullest love that she has to give, that's a rock star mom.
Yeah, it's going to look different for everybody.
That's right. And that's a barometer there, right? And yes, there's something about having a clean home so that, the kid is safe and,
right.
But if we're doing it for other adults, let's say, that's not what what is important, what's most important is the love that's being shown, that's being freely and, unconditionally given.
Yeah.
And if the, desire to be perfect is getting in the way of that love, that perfection needs to be looked at rather than, trying to do better.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm-hmm.
How can you tell me how you got into coaching? What was it
Yeah.
that kind of
So,
brought you into it?
yeah. So, much of my work has been very organic in a lot of ways and has been from really surprising circumstances in
Mm-hmm.
some ways, and also listening deeply to my clients when they're asking me for something. And a few of them are asking. So, going back to coaching, I had a pet sitting and dog walking business that I started in my mid 20s. And, I had never known what I wanted to do with my life and had tried different things. Nothing felt right. And I ended up, becoming a business owner, kind of accidentally in some ways, but beautifully, perfectly in some other ways, right? And by perfect, I mean just synchronicity, the perfection of synchronicity that can happen when we're open and willing to say yes to our biggest dreams, right? So I became a business owner, and so I started that in 1995, and then in the year 2000, I had someone, I live part-time in California, and I had someone in New York contact me and say, I found your pet care website. I have a pet sitting business. You look like you're very successful. Would you be willing to coach me?
Hmm.
And I said yes, even though I'd
Wow.
never coached anyone before. I'd helped my friends, that were starting businesses, but, it was just to help them. And so I helped her for 3 months. I coached her, and she had a big transformation in her business that other pet care providers saw. They
Hmm.
actually witnessed it. They saw her getting, bigger and bigger and, more profitable and all of that very quickly. And so
Yeah.
they asked her, like, how did you do it? And she said, well, Kristin helped me. And so then I had all these East Coast coaching clients. I'm a West Coast girl,
Yeah.
and I'm working with all these New Yorkers, and it was absolutely fantastic and fun and wonderful. And then they told their friends and family members, and then it kind of spread, across the
Wow.
country. And so it was very organic, and
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know what I was doing when I said yes, but I knew that I knew how to run a successful business. And I felt like I could be a good teacher for that because I had done it.
Mm-hmm.
And I had gone from never being a business owner to, 5 years later, being a fairly successful business owner. So if I could just teach what I had learned through, falling on my face numerous times, making lots of mistakes, hiring really awful people, and then needing to fire them, and, never
Mm-hmm.
having been a boss, but having to learn how to hire good people, and then gradually learning that skill, because it is a learned skill. It's not like this inherent skill that we might have, the hiring skill. I was able to teach that to her and then to others. And so fast forward to today, I coach all types of business owners. And I have a podcast that I started 7 years ago called Prosperous Pet Business. And that is also, me coaching business owners on that podcast, but it's pet business owners.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are new moms, or even, moms that have been around the block for a while, who are interested in starting a pet business or really any kind of business,
Mm-hmm.
one of those podcasts can be a nice way to kind of, dip your toe in to really hear what it's like running a
Mm-hmm.
business, the
Mm-hmm.
true, authentic uh, business owner life. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been lucky to have a few entrepreneurs on that own their own business and start a business. And it's really interesting to hear, like, it's glamorized in some regard, but it's also like, you know, the pros and cons of being able to kind of have your own schedule a little bit and have, get out of that 9 to 5 is really, dream a lot of, I think, people have. And I think a lot of moms or parents after they have kids kind of realize, I want something different in my life. Like I
Oh
don't want to be
yeah.
held to this 9 to 5. I want to stay home longer with my baby, and like they kind
Mhm.
of have this desire to like maybe form something. Do you ever work with people that haven't started a business yet, or are you mostly
Yep.
with established businesses?
No, I work often with people who haven't started a business that are thinking about a certain type of business, or they're getting ready to create this certain type of business and they're not quite sure what the next steps are in order to create it.
Mm-hmm.
And, a couple words of wisdom that I have for moms that are thinking about starting a business are, um, it's going to be important if you're getting into a business because you want to create certain hours or only work certain hours, it's going to be really important to stick to that. Because if you give clients the opportunity to pick your hours, they're going to probably pick the hours that aren't going to work for you as a business owner. And so, what I see with a lot of business owners, including moms who got into business because they wanted to choose their
Mm-hmm.
own
Mm-hmm.
hours, their own working hours, what they'll do is they'll give clients free reign, or the clients will say, hey, can you do this one time at this time? I need this urgently. And
Yeah.
then they'll do that. And then, once they let go of that time boundary, then it can become kind of a free for all. And it's really important to create that sacredness in terms of time,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because what can happen is the very reason that you decided to start your business, which was to create the hours that you wanted, is now you not having what you initially wanted. And then you're scratching your head going, why is my business not working? Well, it's not
Mm-hmm.
working because you didn't abide by those sacred time boundaries
Yeah.
that are important for you as a mom, that are important for you, for your kids, that are important for your well-being. Like I see this a lot with people who decide to implement an exercise program, let's say, and they have a Pilates class on Monday, Wednesday, Friday at a certain time. And a client will want that time, let's say on Wednesday,
Yeah.
and they'll give it to the client. And then suddenly the Pilates, because they're out of that routine, will fall by the wayside, or
Mm.
whatever it is that has been what they've needed to do for their well-being. And so it's so important to have the items that are most important, whether that be, connecting with kids, connecting with ourselves, to have that be as important as a new
Mm.
client call, right?
Yeah.
Or a connection with a new client, or onboarding a new client.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's something that I see a lot happen. And also the other thing is expecting a new baby business to support them. Like you wouldn't expect your infant to support you. That would be
Right.
ridiculous, right?
Right.
So in the same way, it's like, don't quit your day job
Mm-hmm.
or whatever kind of job you have before you have something else, before your business is self-supporting.
Right.
So that may
Right.
mean that you're, doing double time. And
Mm-hmm.
this would not work for new moms, right? They wouldn't be
Right.
able to do both. But this might be somebody that has kids that are in school. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you could do your business as a side hustle, start there. And then as it gains momentum and starts to be able to be a transitional financial bridge, then it might be time to go from working 5 days a week in your regular job to 3 days to 1 day, which is what I did when I created my business. I was able to transition that. Not everybody can do that though. But the most important thing is to not put all your eggs in one basket in terms of forcing your business to support you or giving yourself a year, like I'm going to, have my business be successful in a year. Sometimes it can take 2 or 3 years to actually have that business gain traction. And if you're feeling that financial stress, that's going to be perhaps as stressful as working a job that is, perhaps not the hours that you want to work.
Yeah. I've actually recently heard, and I'm trying to remember the source where I heard it from, but I mean, it's probably more common business knowledge, but I am not a business major, but, it does take about 2 to 3 years usually for a business to kind of get itself off the ground and be close to self-sustainable. And so
that's right.
I think there's a lot of, desperation when someone starts something, wanting it to work, and it like you said, kind of puts all the eggs in one basket. And that's hard to put that much pressure on something to succeed when it's the only thing you're counting on.
Yeah, it's like looking at a sproutling that you've put in the ground and saying, grow, grow, grow. And like, you're putting, you're giving it fertilizer and water, and you're like, why aren't you growing faster? Well, a plant can only grow as fast as it can. You could do all the right things as a business owner, but still, sometimes what is most necessary is the snowball, of clients or customers, and then them telling people, there's power in that, in word of mouth. And that can be the most trustworthy type of referral, than getting really good at social media marketing, which, would be great if you're a business owner and will definitely benefit you, or hiring somebody to do that. But still, it can cost a lot of money to do the social media marketing. Whereas if you have, one client who absolutely adores working with you, or one customer who loves your product, if they can be a marketing stream for you, because they're so happy and they love it so much, then they could, it be an influencer in terms of 10 people that otherwise wouldn't know about you and your business. So, that's really, especially if you're dealing with like a shoestring budget, that's really where you will want to put your initial attention in terms of gaining more clients, is looking at the clients and the customers that you currently have, and who absolutely raves about you and what you offer. And really, teaming up with them and saying, would you be willing to tell 10 of your friends about this? Or would you post this on Nextdoor? In the United States, we have a website called Nextdoor, which can be a powerful resource. And when a client or customer posts there on Nextdoor, you can get so many clients or customers so quickly because of that. It has to be an authentic post, right? People feel that, just like kids can feel love, and authenticity. So can people on Nextdoor and other, so forms of social media. So it's really important to have the customers and clients really be the ones who are tooting the horn, of your business. They can generate results more than, anything can.
Oh yeah. I wanted to ask you, because I know you have a whole variety of clients, but what would be maybe one of your favorite things working with the mama population?
Yeah. So, I mean, I love like work-life balance, because that can be such a charged issue with moms who are trying to work. Maybe it's not even that they have a business. I work with a lot of people who don't have businesses, who are working and they have kids and they are really stressed out. So, burnout is one of my favorites. I mean, I hate that people go through it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I love helping people untangle that and really looking at that from a lot of different angles. And it really does start with ourselves. And where have we not given ourselves what we need? Right. And it doesn't have to be like this huge long list. It can start with something small that, we do every day. That powerful habit of self-care can really build upon that small habit, can build and have a ripple effect. And kids are witnessing the way their moms are taking care of themselves or not. And they are going to emulate that as they get older, because we take on what we witness from our role models. And, one of the beliefs that I had as a new business owner is something that I witnessed my dad doing, which was he worked all the time. He was super stressed all the time. And he was, just the only time that he would ever rest would be falling down in exhaustion on the bed.
Yeah.
And so my belief, we make up beliefs as a result of what we witness others or role models going through, right? It may even be like, it's not a conscious thing usually, but it's what we make up. Like, I made up that making money is hard. And that was my belief as a business owner. And then I look around at the business owners I know when I'm in my mid-20s starting a business, and I see either business owners who have time, but not a lot of customers or clients, and they're totally stressed about, finances, or they have a lot of customers or clients, but they're totally stressed because they don't have any time. And so I had no role model for both time and money. What does that look like? But what was underneath that? Like, I couldn't even really deal with creating a business that gave me both time and money if I had this underlying belief that making money is hard. That was really driving the show for me, as well as this real need to compulsively overwork, because I saw overworking. Well, society really portrays that, right?
Yes.
The refrain is, I'm so busy, right? You ask somebody how they're doing. They don't say, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling happy, I'm feeling glad. They say, I'm so busy. They're so disconnected from their feelings. And so I had to look at, okay, there's no one that I can see that, is embodying time and money in my reality. But that's a desire for me. And so I had to dig deep and look at, well, what's the root of not giving myself time and money? And I had to really realize it's, and through journal writing and really introspection, I really looked at, oh, I had this dad that worked all the time, that compulsively overworked. And so I intuitively and instinctually took that on as a way of being. And if I'm not questioning a way of being, there is no way for me to get out of that way of being. I am trapped in the prison of that way of being because I am not looking at it. And so I began to look at it, and that was hard. It's like, I love my dad. When we're having to look at, our parent may be making a mistake, that's hard to look at if we love that parent, right? And care about that parent. But people are imperfect. Being a human being is an imperfect opportunity, right out of the
Right.
gate. Like the moment we're born, we're
Right.
imperfect. And, that continues until we're dead. So welcome to being a human being. We're imperfect. So what I began doing is really looking at this belief that I had created, which was making money is hard. And then where did that originate from? It originated from witnessing my dad working all the time. So I had to pull it out like a crusty old carrot, out of the ground from the depths of my being, right? It's old, gnarly, roots are coming out. It is not a pretty thing. I would never want to eat this carrot. It is like, ugh, yuck.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's what we have to do. We have to pull it out by the root. Where did this belief originate? And so I realized, oh, it came from my dad. Well, is that the life I want to live? Is that the kind of business I want to run? No. How can I then turn it on its side? That belief needs to be something different for me. I am not my dad. And so I flipped it on its side, making money is easy. And that felt like a total lie. And it was a
Right.
lie because that was not my reality. But okay, could it be true? And has it been true at certain times in my life? Maybe not all the time. And I could see that there were times in my business where making money had been easy. And how can I then create more of those times? And what does making money is easy look for me going forward? So it's not just creating this affirmation. That's kind of the first step after getting in touch with the belief. But it's like, okay, I began saying making money is easy. And I wrote a Post-it note and I put it on my bathroom mirror and I put it on my dashboard of my car. I began saying it to myself. But an affirmation will not get you there in and of itself. It is a starting point. What needs to happen is taking action as a result of that. And not only outer action, if you're really working with a belief that is deep within you, it's doing the inner work too. So, every morning I was journaling. I was doing morning pages, which is from The Artist's Way. Not a business book per se, but I've learned a lot about business from The Artist's Way. It's a 12-week program within the book. And one of the weeks is writing morning pages. And it's 3 pages of writing without editing, without critiquing, without even reading it when you're done, except later on, a few days later, or even a year later. But it's like taking out the trash, right? And so I began taking out the trash with my beliefs and really looking at how this belief had shown up in my life and the grief that had been caused as a result of making money is hard. All the opportunities that I had had for connection, for relationships. At that point, I hadn't really been dating much, and just the sadness around that, like how much of my life I had missed because that belief had been at play and really running the show in not only my business, but in my life. And so, in tandem with doing the inner work, I was also doing the outer work, which was, really writing like a 3-year plan of what, making money as easy would look like at the end of those 3 years. And for me, it was perhaps very different than from listeners because everyone is so different. But for me, it was really, okay, I want to have hired this many people.
Yeah.
I want to have managers who are running my business. I eventually want to be able to travel for months at a time while my business runs. And I did that. I lived in Bali for 6 months, 1 year, and then 3 months, another year. I lived in India for a few months. And I was able to travel and live in other countries while my business ran. Yeah, and that was a vision for me. It may not be a vision for listeners, or for some it may be, but really it's very personal.
Yeah.
It's like a personal experience of what does flipping that belief on its side, look for you. Once you get to that belief, whatever belief you made about business or life. And, one of the beliefs that I made when I was dating was, because I had been in long-term relationships, but I had never been married up until that time, or even at that time, was I'm too old to be married. I mean, that was a deep held belief, and a lot of society was reflecting that. And so if I had really believed that belief, and, it was a prison that wasn't allowing me to get out and make a transformation in my life, like the walls were thick. And I had to really look at, well, where did that belief originate? Well, a lot of that was societal belief, right? But a lot of that was within me too.
Yeah.
And so flipping it on its side was, I'm the perfect age to get married. And that actually felt truer, because I had had this really rich, full life as a single person. And I really felt ready to have a transformation in my life by meeting and marrying the man who is now my husband. Yeah.
I love you kind of outline some of these steps as far as like identifying the false belief, creating a new affirmation, and then taking action. And some of that action was journaling.
Yep.
And some of it was writing out 3-year plan, or your just, I think, just your desires or your dreams for what you want it to look like. What was I going to ask you now? I had a question. Oh, do you have any type of tool or activity where someone can maybe start to identify some of those false beliefs? Because I do think sometimes we don't see them when they're right in front of us. And I'm going to, again, just back to being a parent, and like, I feel like I am relearning so much now that I'm teaching my kids, and I'm faced with like, why am I frustrated about the situation? Like, what is it that is getting me upset? It's not the kid, like the kid's going to act the way they're going to act, but like, I'm having to kind of do some of these deep dives myself. And thankfully, like, I've been doing therapy for a while now, so I kind of get to go through this with a third person, like you said, or a third party person. And, but is there another way, or is there, what would be the best method, I guess, for someone to maybe kind of start to identify some of these false beliefs in their life?
Well, there are two things, and they're both free resources that I offer. So one of them is listening to the Business Pathfinder podcast, because I work with some people on their limiting beliefs that they've had.
Yeah.
And so that can be an opportunity for them to be able to really begin to identify through, really hearing others doing that process. They may have inner ahas. So that's one thing that they may want to do, is listen to some of those coaching sessions that are both life and business, usually in the same session. The other thing is, I have a goal setting workbook that is on my site. It's a free resource. And it's titled Create Your Best Year Yet. And so that can be something that, though it doesn't have specifically ways to identify beliefs, it does have, like, what are the factors that are keeping me from what I want to create? That can help kind of trigger what may be in the way, and maybe roadblocks to actually creating the life that, you say you want to create, right? And, what I've noticed can be one of the hardest questions, and I realize this in my life, but also in working with my coaching clients on the podcast and outside of the podcast, is the question of, what do I want? What do I want? Because a lot of what can come up is like, can I give that to myself? Oh my gosh, that, feels like impossible. All our voices can come in. And so what can be a powerful exercise is, asking ourselves in journal writing, here's what I want. And then just bullet points, work, life, family, finances, home, animals, what do you want? What do you want? And then, and I get chills actually when I think about that, because it can be so triggering for so many people. It seems like a wonderful, light, breezy question, but if you're digging deep into the heart of what you want, it can bring up a lot of resistance. And so then, like, what is getting in the way of these things? Well, it might be money, it might be time, but get more specific. So for money, it might be, I am not making enough money. I am living paycheck to paycheck. Okay, so that can be something to work on. Then you're looking at, well, how much do I need to bring in each month? How much am I actually bringing in each month? Where is that, gap? Okay, that's a starting point. I need to make this much more each month, right? In order to begin to get out of scarcity. And, going back to what you said, which was like, why am I frustrated with my kids? And really, I love that you're doing that deep dive within yourself. Like you're doing the work, which is so fantastic. And I'm so happy for, everyone within your circle, because we teach others how to treat us. And we do that by treating ourselves with love and care. And so by you actually doing that work, you're giving yourself that love and care, and you're enabling that, to everyone in your sphere of influence, including your kids, your partner, all of that. But what I wanted to say is something about the frustration. Like if we find ourselves getting overly frustrated by something, whatever it may be, an important thing to look at is if it's hysterical, it's historical. So if we're being hysterical, I say that in quotes, but if we're like, if we fly off the handle, if we're like if what happened and our reaction to it is like, if our reaction is so much bigger than the incident, then it's probably historical, which means it's something from the past, perhaps from our childhood. And so what we can say is, like, I'm thinking about you. So you have something that your kid does, okay? And you feel frustrated. So what you might want to say is like, where have I experienced this frustration in the past that has nothing to do with my kid? And where does this show up in my life currently, or where has this shown up in my past, whether it's in your childhood or, some other time that has nothing to do with your child? And that can be a really powerful dig into the historical part. And that will then begin to dismantle the hysteria. And by hysteria, I mean like deep-seated frustration, anger, perhaps,
overreaction.
Exactly. Super powerful. And it can be hard to do in that moment, but sometimes if we can begin to do it after the fact, the more we can do it after the fact, like, oh, if it's hysterical, it's historical. Like just saying that, okay, where did I feel this in my past that has nothing to do with, let's say, my child or my work or this person in my life who is upsetting me so much? Where have I experienced this in the past? And then we can begin to pull out that carrot, that old knobby belief carrot that, that until we pull it out and really examine it from all sides, we won't really be able to move beyond it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's very powerful. I love that.
Yeah.
Kristin, where can people find you?
So they can go to my website, which is kristinmorrison.com. And it's my name is with 2 I's. A lot of people put that E in there, but it's Kristin,
Mm-hmm.
Morrison.com. And also Business Pathfinders, my podcast. I'm on Instagram at Coach Kristin Morrison. Also Business Pathfinder podcast on Instagram. And if they're interested in starting a pet business, they can listen to Prosperous Pet Business. That podcast has been around for 7 years, going strong. And if there are people that want to apply to be coached on my podcast, I do that for free as an opportunity to really be able to work with people who are listening to the podcast that are really struggling. And so not only will you who are applying and get to be coached on the podcast get help, that's my intention, that you actually walk away with action steps and clear goals and feeling lighter and freer is what a lot of people say after the sessions, and that's also one of my intentions. But it also helps listeners at a really deep level. So, not only will you be helping yourself, but you'll be helping listeners. And when we can have things that we do in our life be a win-win, that's powerful. It not only can help us, but it can help others. That's amazing. And you're doing that, right? With this podcast. It's probably helping you. You're probably learning a lot, but you are doing so much for moms out there by offering these episodes where they can feel like they are seen and heard. And that is a huge gift that you are giving your listeners.
Thank you. I definitely appreciate your offer too for just being able to work on your podcast with you. I think that'd be great.
Absolutely.
So I will be linking all of that in the show notes so people can find you. And if they want to apply to be on your podcast, that would be amazing. You also mentioned, I heard you mention it earlier. I didn't want to leave them out, that you do offer some workshops. Can you tell me a little bit about any of those?
Yeah, so I have, like, in a few weeks, I have a mid-year goal setting workshop, people often set goals at the beginning of the year and then they just go by the wayside. This is an opportunity to revisit those goals that perhaps you had at the beginning of the year and really look at, what you want to create going forward and how you can actually achieve that. So, that may or may not be available when people are listening, but I also have social media workshops. So I do both business workshops and personal growth workshops. And so the others that are coming up this year in 2023 have to do with social media. It's, how to use pay-per-click and Google ads to grow your business, how to market your business using social media, how to create social media strategy, using AI to grow your business. That's another one. And then I will have, at the beginning of every year, I have a goal setting workshop, and it's very, the personal growth workshops especially are very interactive. It's an opportunity for people to meet other business owners in small breakout groups, as well as, the larger group. Oftentimes there's an opportunity to get a business buddy within the group so that you have accountability, going forward. So it's not just doing the workshop and not having that. That doesn't happen with the business workshops per se, but it does happen with the personal growth workshops because I find those need a lot of support, beyond.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much today for coming on the podcast and sharing that with us. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate you too, and the important work you're doing here on this podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent, Kristin. Stop the
Oh,
recording. Thank you so much for joining today. I really hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I really love seeing the parallels between business owners and motherhood. Next week on the podcast is a solo episode from me. We are having Love Week at our church this week, and I'm able to volunteer at a few events to pour out into the community. So a lot of it will be a recap on those events. And a lot of these foundations that we're serving in the community are those that are going to be financially supported by my podcast. So again, if you guys feel like donating at all to the podcast, there are a couple options. You can find them down in the show notes or in the description box below. And there's recurring monetary donations set up, or you can do a one-time payment. And just know that I can't wait to see you guys next week. Thank you. 10% of whatever comes into the podcast is going to go back out to these charities and foundations that are supporting mamas all over.